Hey, welcome everyone to Woo Woo Mommas podcast. We have a special guest today. I'm going to let Gina Crisafulli introduce him.
Okay, tonight we have Austin Crisafulli, and I have a special connection to Austin because he is my cousin, but he's also the author of this book, How Can I Still Get Home? And I am going to have some links up so that you can go right to Amazon. It is an intense read. It chronicles his whole journey with drug addiction. I'm going to be the first one to tell you, Austin, I'm glad that you're here to be able to tell your story, because after reading this, I don't know how you're here, but you are. And I hope you have received that as a sign that you have your own journey here. And your story needs to be told. And you just seem like you're very humble. And I think you might be looking at this book like, yeah, it's just my life. It's so much bigger than that. Like, I'm not saying this because I'm your cousin or related. If I didn't know you at all, I would be saying the same exact things about this book because I couldn't put it down. It's like this, you're raw, you're honest. You write it in simple terms. So it's an easy read in terms of you make it simple, but it's so raw and so real that it's very deep. And I'm just going to tell people, just go get it. Just go buy it, read it. And we want to hear from you. We want to hear about your journey. Kolein, I think we're going to do this in a couple different parts, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can't just do this in one big part because there's so much to it that we have to do this in a couple layers. So, so tell us, I'm going to hand it over to you, Austin, and you can tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
All right. Well, I do want to say, in regards to the book itself, something interesting about it that I'm sure both of you picked up on is, well, in my experience, women are more touched by the book, I think, because it's written poetically. It's difficult for most men to connect with that soft side, that feminine side, if you will.
I cried. I'm not lying. Yeah. I cried.
99% of the women who have read it have reached out to me, whereas none of the men have. And they all said, wow, I really connected with this. This was really deep. So it speaks on an emotional level. It's very void of logic, in my opinion. Like it's a wild story, and there's almost, there's no summation at the end. You know, like it just sort of ends. And that's just how life is.
We both picked up on that. We're like,
it was like, what?
Exactly. And it was a carefully crafted story like that. Almost a giant tale that made no sense, where you could put it down and say, what the hell did I just do for 2 hours? You know, what was that? And it encapsulates everything that I wanted it to. Humor, horror, terror. Like, I was able to tell my story and be the funny guy, Austin, at the same time with a lot of it, which I'm sure you noticed,
Yeah, I totally picked up on all of that.
I would say,
I don't know. Oh, go ahead, Kolein.
No, I was just going to say, I would say it's dark humor. I mean, really.
Yes. Yeah. Tell me what you felt when you were reading it, but when you, like, in different scenes, when you were out in the snow cold, I was actually cold. When you were like in dark places, not meaning like literally dark, but I'm talking about spiritually dark places with dark people, I felt it. Like, I felt like I was on a roller coaster all the time. Yep. When you felt peace, I felt peace. And I'm like, okay, am I feeling this because that's just my life and I can feel things from other people? Or like, is this him just being able to write so incredibly well that he's making us feel this? I don't know.
Yeah. I think so honest. I think honesty is like that. It can be raw, it can be ugly, it can be beautiful. And when people are being honest, like your book is, like you are, I think that's why we feel it. And so to make a comment to your talking about women talking to, so women can connect with that, right? Men can't always express that. I mean, I don't want to lump everybody into a category, but that's true. I mean, men, you know, they will be a little bit more self-protective, right? And maybe when they're driving down the street thinking about something that you had written or another day, they're still in the processing of it. Whereas we're very present with our emotions,
Yes.
typically. For me, Gina couldn't put it down. And I told Austin before we got on tonight that I had to put it down. I would read one of those dark scenes. I mean, I can't watch, scary movies just to like tell you my personality, because I like literally will absorb the energy. And so,
Yeah.
But what was happening for me is I would sense the spiritual aspect of it, and I would need to really, it took me about, how long did I have it? Like 2 months?
You had it for a couple of months.
Yeah. And so it didn't take me 2 months to read it, when I was reading it, I would have to put it down and I would have to process and think about the fact that these were real people. This was a real person's life. This person not only journeyed through his heartache and his addiction, okay, his broken heart and his addiction, but he survived not once, many times.
Yeah.
That's the miracle, right? Like how the right?
He's like a cat on steroids. Forget about 9 lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
that is not the case. We had a woman on last night whose daughter, within a 3-month time frame, gone. Okay.
And Austin, this was someone that had her wisdom teeth out. She did not have a drug addiction problem. She had her wisdom teeth out. And because of oxycodone that she was given, I mean, went from 0 to 1,000 overnight. And it turned into like heroin addiction within 2 months or 2 weeks. And she, her mom told us, and we're going to talk about this. I'm going to let you get with your story, but I found it interesting that you talked about one night before going to rehab, you had to shoot up one last time. And her mom said that she went to the airport. Her father booked the flight. She says, I'm falling off the wagon. I need to get to rehab. And she went into the airport bathroom and she had to get that one last, and her mom understood that. She said, she goes, this is what drug addicts do. They have this one last. And I'm like, oh my God, that's what I read in his thing. And I'm like, it must be like someone going on a diet, wanting to go on like a food bender the night before. And they're
Precisely.
like, okay, wow.
Yeah, it's with the addiction, it's life or death. That's what non-addicts might not be able to grasp unless a close family member, things like that. But it's fight or flight 24/7. Like getting, that's why people overdose and die. That's why they are a heroin addict forever instead of just stopping, because it's life or death, and so the last one is just, it's the last hurrah. It has to take place. That's part of the show, that's where you are in your head. So,
wow.
So the airport.
Go to where you began. Tell us about the beginning of all of this. I know that in the beginning, I know you said you were 12, you saw some oxycodone on your grandmother's nightstand. You didn't touch it that time,
no.
Right?
Correct. Okay. I did not touch it.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon me. All right, so I'm thinking back to where I was. The first thing I ever did was I smoked weed. I think I was 11. I smoked weed when I was 11 out of a soda can. that was like weed and cigarettes as a little boy, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and then once I was smoking weed, that would be, yeah, so 13. And then 14 was the first time I ever got drunk at a party. So 13, I was already high and abusing drugs. It happened, it was a website before, you know, this was 2002. So it was before, really, it was before the internet, even. Like we can comfortably say that. The internet as we know it, for sure. And there was a site called, I think it was called Erowid, EROWID. And it was a forum about drugs that I found when I was 12 or 13. And I learned about what the drugs were, and then I wrote down all the names of the ones that would get you high. I didn't even know what an opiate was. I was 13, you know, and this was before Google existed, but it just wasn't the same resource that it is now, you know. Um, and then I took them, I think with one of my buddies, we were 12 or 13, and I took them, and actually I'm still good friends with the one guy right now. And we snorted them for the first time. We each snorted one 5 milligram one, and had a great night. And I felt that warm feeling. It wasn't addiction right off the bat, but I knew that it was a way to feel good. And 13, that's still a little boy,
Yeah.
you know. I was just
Yeah. So what, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, because I remember when I was those ages and I was like, you know, with my friends, you know, ice skating and, you know, having ice cream, you know,
Yeah.
So what was it? And I have to tell you, like, I'm 54, and when up till now, like, if you said oxycodone, I'm thinking painkiller. I'm not thinking getting high off. Like, I'm not thinking that's a drug that you're going to want to get high off of. I know it's something like you could get addicted to painkillers, but so you read this when you were younger that you could get a high off of it, and like what was your desire to want to do it?
It was peer pressure and experimenting and trying to look cool.
Okay.
I was 13. The guy I did it with was 15 at the time, and he had done them before, and he goes, "Wait, your grandma has these?" I go, "Yeah, she has like a whole thing of them." And he's like, "Well, take as many as you can and bring them here and we'll sell them." So yeah, Oswego, I mean, I was the first drug addict I ever knew, you know, like it wasn't known for junkies wandering the streets, Oswego. You just
Right.
didn't see it. I didn't see it as a little boy. You know where I grew up, Gina.
I knew where you grew up.
You know, I didn't see that. So it just took over, and it spread throughout my friend group. A lot of them, even from 10 years ago, don't even talk to me anymore because they blame me for getting them hooked when they were very young men or little kids, really. Um, yeah, it took over in my friend group, and then it spread, and then I found out that other pockets of people were doing it, and it's just not the same vibe that it's looked at these days. This was 15 years ago, and everything was just slightly different. You know, I don't have to explain every detail of how things are different, but the world is just a different place, and we all moved into addiction together. That's really what happened. Probably like 40% of my graduating class, we moved into addiction and partying together, you know. And there were the people who drank, and there were the people who smoked weed. Those were like the lacrosse kids and the hockey kids, and you know, the cool group, all those people, the baseball kids. And then then up in the attic at the party, there was the cocaine people, you know, and they were doing lines and then coming back down to the party, and then out in the cars and around the corner, that was the junkie people. And so we were all at the same house party, but just doing different activities. And this was everything.
You know, it's funny because I remember going to parties in high school, and you know, even like the marijuana and the smoking stuff, like I never did any of that. You know, I might have been at parties, but that was like, it was always very private and separate. And I was never invited into those rooms. And I think it's because people knew that I didn't do that stuff. I'm finding that today's culture is that nothing's hidden anymore. It's just all out in the open. People are doing what they're doing, and they're doing it in front of whoever's there, and there's no secrecy to it. There's no, you know,
there's
no
almost a pride behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
There's a pride among the kids, you know, the kids who are like 17 through 27 right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like to be a drug addict is trendy. That's what I mean. Like things have changed. It's not something to be ashamed of anymore. Where in my
Yeah.
generation, I was mortified. Mortified. I was so embarrassed. Even as a little boy,
Wow.
15, 16.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. But yet you still did it.
I still did it because I had no control. I was
Okay.
completely out of control.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So would you say that you said peer pressure, but would you say that there was some need, and I think you did address this a bit in the book, is that there's some need to sort of mask your life, right? To like hide from your life. Escape, I mean, is a word too, but there was like a part of you that just didn't want to really look at your life either, like your home life and your feelings, maybe, you know, the intense things that were going on around you. Um, would you say that that was heavier part of it, or peer pressure was part of more the weighty part?
As such a young man, I wasn't thinking existentially at all. You
Yeah.
know, I was thinking, how can I say this? Was I wouldn't say I was hiding behind it. I think it filled something in that only now as an adult do I see what it was doing.
Yeah.
Like in the book, my mother left when I was 8. And years later, did that abandonment turn into something that spiraled out of control? And I found that Oxycontin and heroin and painkillers gave me that motherly warmth that I was lacking. And only as an adult have I even entertained that thought, because I've been trying to figure it out myself. You know,
Mm-hmm.
why did it almost get me, but it didn't? What lesson do I have to learn here? You know, while everyone else drops all around me, why what what more can I take from this, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but throughout the book, it seems like even when you were having these experiences, and maybe I'm misinterpreting this, it seemed like you had a depth to you while you were having the experiences. Not that
Yes.
you were seeking the answers, but that you were deeply thinking, considering what was going on, and you know, and with the loss of so many people, you know, there people were literally dropping dead. I mean, from their addictions, literally your friends, um, you know, running from the law, that kind of thing. But yet it seems like you were also thinking deeply through those processes.
I was, and I wish I could explain that. That's just who I am. Like there's no other way to put it. It's something I could say it really started after Ibogaine, because I developed a self-awareness that is, it's just incredibly rare. And, you know, I'm still very human, obviously, you know. I'm still rude, I'm still angry sometimes, I'm still this, I'm still that. But I have a self-awareness about me, and I accredit that to Ibogaine. And I think that's when it started. I was 21. Yeah, I turned 21 in Mexico. So I was 21 when that really developed.
Tell us about
Pardon me.
Ibogaine for those who don't know what it is. And
Ibogaine is, sorry, pardon me. My work phone's going off, but I just want it to stop. So Ibogaine is a synthesized component that comes from a shrub that grows native in Africa. It's called the Tabernacle Iboga. And I'll tell you the myth about Ibogaine first. And so the myth is that an African tribe called the Bwiti, Bwiti, they have a sacred bond with the Tabernacle Iboga plant, and it has a sacred, very sacred part in their tribe, plays a sacred part in their tribe. And when the young men are 8 years old, they're given Ibogaine and they're left to fend for themselves for 3 days out in the desert. And when they come back, they're a man. But before that, they're a little boy. So there's a very defining moment in this tribe. it's a spiritual experience. You have to survive in the desert, tripping, you know, the hardest that anyone could ever trip ever. And so it's very dramatic. And when you come back, and if you survive, you're a man. So the myth is that the Bwiti tribe members were hunting a jaguar, and before then, a jaguar had snacked on the Tabernanthe boga. It looks like a pepper. It looks like a chili pepper. It's orange. It almost looks like a jalapeno, but orange. And they hunted and ate the jaguar, and they all had a psychedelic experience. And so they traced back what was doing it, and they were watching the jaguars eat the plant. And so they incorporated that into their tribal, you know, procedures.
Wow.
What's it called? Oh, the rite of passage. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Wow.
So some of the Ibogaine you get it's called the root. There's two different kinds. And I know this just by hanging out in the community, you know, hanging out in Mexico, watching other people go through it. It's a very clinical process. So there's two types. There's the root, which is less powerful. And then there's the synthesized version, which we were sending to a doctor in South Africa who was synthesizing it. And what was he? I'm not going to, you know, I don't know chemicals very well, but he was sending it back, and it was a white powder. And so you would take 20 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. So you'd end up taking, you know, 5 capsules, because we would powder weigh it out and then the capsules. What more can I say about it just as an intro? It's incredibly powerful. There's no escaping it. And the more you fight it, the more it's going to hurt. And everyone could learn from it. If every human tonight took Ibogaine, war would stop overnight. Every single soldier would lay down their guns, guaranteed, without question. Money would halt. Jobs and traffic would all be done. People would look at their lives and say, what the hell are we doing? This is it's so unbalanced from where we need to be, that it would just shock you. And it does things to you permanently. A lot of people, you know, 99% of people were better off. And I also watched one woman who was in her 60s. Her son was a drug addict, and she wanted to go down and try it. She had no issues whatsoever. She was overweight, but she had no drug issues, no, you know, booze or anything like that. And she came down and did it, and she laid in bed for 3 days, and she was just sobbing and weeping about, I'm in my 60s, like life is nothing like I thought it was. She was in a good state of mind. She was positive and inspired and encouraged, but she was just looking back. It provides you with this sense of self that you could not see before. And it's like, oh my goodness, like my health is out of whack. My thoughts are out of whack. My priorities are out of whack. And it just opens your eyes. It grabs your head and forces you to look, really.
And
truly.
some people might call that the dark night of the soul experience, right? I mean, we're talking the depth of that.
Yes. Yeah, that was a common phrase, actually. That's when I first heard that phrase, was during Ibogaine Gray Days. And you try not to talk too much about the worst possible outcome. You know, like in the book, I wrote a thing that I heard somewhere or read somewhere. I said, like in World War I, you hope you get shot. If you're going to be killed in the trenches, you hope you get shot, because you can't imagine being blown apart. And so you don't really talk about the worst possible thing, but everyone knows, like, you are going to fight the devil tonight, and you have no choice. You have no choice, because you're either going to die, or you're going to fight him and win, or die. So those are your choices. Because
do people actually die?
So to find an Ibogaine provider with no deaths is very rare.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it takes place in Mexico. Mexico is incredibly corrupt. Just like most cities and countries in the world. Just like the city I'm in right now, Chicago, probably the most corrupt city in the nation, if not DC. But things happen there. It was very common for Ibogaine, because the federales, who are the fake police in Mexico, they're very familiar with what, they control what's going on. It's a giant enterprise. That's all it is. So they know what's going on. And it was very common for Ibogaine getaways to get raided. The passports from all the Americans would get taken. All the cash would get taken. Excuse me, everything would get taken. So,
wow.
Yeah. So the deaths, there were a lot of horror stories with the deaths. I had one chapter in the book that Trisha, Gina, cousin Trisha,
yeah,
she didn't tell me she didn't tell me to take it out, but it was a story about a guy who killed himself after he did Ibogaine. And when she told me that it wasn't quite necessary, I looked at it differently and I said, I think you're right. It seems like I'm poking. It seems like I'm trying to get a reaction. And that's when it becomes insincere. You know what I mean? That's when it becomes synthetic. So we took that part out, but I won't use any names, but it was a fella and he took Ibogaine, and you have to sign forms saying that if you kill yourself here, sorry, you're on your own. That's why you're in Mexico. That's why you're in Mexico. And it's not even illegal in Mexico. It's just a gray area, just like most things here, just like buying marijuana at the store that you can do now. It's just a gray area, and so he had a terrible trip, threw up the whole time. It was not an enlightening and inspiring experience. He was terrified. He was surrounded by demons. The shaman was even like, oh my goodness, like something's really wrong. This guy, like we have to get him away from the other people, definitely, because he's powerfully evil. And so what happened was Ibogaine was telling him to kill himself, basically. And so when you're in that realm and you're under the influence of the Ibogaine gods, there's an intimate trust, because there's just so much more powerful than you, and they have control over that realm. And I don't know if they're solid. I don't know if they're vapor. I don't know if they're in my head. I don't know if they're outside of me. I don't know what it is, and I'll never know. And I have to just be okay with that. But they're powerful and they're stern and they tell you the truth. And that's why Ibogaine works. You have to have ears to listen. And it was telling this guy, you need to try again. And what he meant was, what the Ibogaine gods meant was, you need to reincarnate. You need to come back. You need to, you cannot, basically they said you can't go to heaven, or like you can't evolve because of what you've done in this lifetime. And this is truly a tragic story. It's shocking to hear as a mother, I'm sure. And so this guy, he was not okay for a week, and then he finally went back to the border in Tijuana to get on a flight in San Diego, and he never crossed the border. The doctor dropped him off, and he never crossed the border, and he killed himself that night in a hotel room in Tijuana, like a shitty, he got drugs and then killed himself that night. And when Johnny called his mother to say, hey, it's been 3 days, no one's heard from him. Well, we found out what happened. Your son died. And she said, thank God. She said, that monster is gone. Comes out, the truth rolls out eventually. Pedophile, loads of child pornography on his computer, just really nasty stuff, snuff films.
Wow.
Yeah, people being killed on camera, just demented things. So he was all into that, and the Ibogaine sought that out through his consciousness and said, dude, like the longer you live, the worse the world is, truly.
Yeah.
So that and there that's just one story. That was one that I experienced closer. But I've heard lots of horror stories. People so Guatemala, Costa Rica, and Mexico are the big ones. Costa Rica was the one that was exploding in like 2014. Everyone was an Ibogaine practitioner. Everyone's got the answer. You got to stick with this program. Don't listen to that guy. There was a Facebook forum, 10 years ago now, called Ibogaine Universe. And people were battling on Ibogaine Universe about what the best method is, what's the best this, and what's the best that. So it got competitive. And it turned into, again, a crooked enterprise, much like pharmaceuticals, much like college these days. Like, it starts with good intention. Eventually, And that's the worst part
People
is,
start seeing, they start seeing what they perceive as, money making, and they turn it into something else. That's,
and it loses its beauty. It
yeah.
loses its beauty, and people start getting nasty. And so there are, I don't want to dwell too much on the deaths, but there were people being left on doorsteps while 911 was called, dead, things like, and these are Americans. And
Wow.
yeah, and but that was probably less than 1%. What I experienced primarily from primary experience was unrealistic beauty and healing that took place in places other than this realm. People being moved to tears just 1 hour after swallowing the medicine and then saying, oh my God, what have I been doing? Who am I? Why do I not feel sick anymore? It's almost instantaneous. Each time it was between 1 and 3 hours when the person was not a drug addict anymore. You feel it in your spirit. You feel it in every ounce of you, each muscle, each bone. You feel it cleanse you. And it could never be recreated. Like, there's only one experience like that. No other hallucinogen could ever even come close to it, because it just has such a grip on you. It takes you wherever it wants to. What you want is irrelevant. That's why you need to submit to it. You have to, or it's going to strangle you into submission, basically.
I'm going to get deeper into all that. And I'm going to ask you this question, and then Colleen, I'm going to let you ask him. I want you to ask him whatever, you were going to ask him, because then I'm going to backtrack a little bit. But did this experience help you to understand, or bring an awareness to the fact that we can live in two different dimensions at the same time? And kind of like, we have two different realities, like our personal, our human, and then other stuff that's within reach. Like, because I always believe everything is within reach. There's stuff that I'm learning right now, and it's good to get a perspective of somebody that's been through something like you have. It's a different, it's like a different mechanism, but what we have is right in front of us. We just have to know how to attain it and how to reach it. Do you agree with that, since you've been through that? Okay.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, we exist simultaneously in a billion different places that we could never access, because we're just not there. We're not where we used to be.
We're living the human experience, and we're not. Okay.
Very human.
Colleen, what were you going to say?
Well, a couple of things while you were talking about that experience, and the people dying, and specifically that gentleman and his mother's response. I know someone who did, psychedelics and lots of different drugs many, many years ago. And he actually felt a serpent go into his being, and he carried this around with him. Okay. And he tried to live life very damaged. He went to work every day, and he, functioned as a seemingly normal human being. And he had a spiritual experience that didn't have anything to do with drugs. And this serpent literally came out of his mouth, out of his being. He always had a pain right where his belly button was. And people witnessed this. Actually, he was being prayed for at a church. And the sound apparently that he made as this thing left his being, like the people in the back of this building, like, could hear this. And a woman that I know, she's since passed, she literally saw it flying out of his mouth. And I have like 7 questions that I'm trying to like sort through in my brain right now. So you going on this journey, right? Immediately you're exposed to the goodness, to the love, to the vibration that is healing you. Okay. were you carrying something? Did anything leave you? Did you know, what was that
Yes.
like?
Yep. So I have an experience where something left me and I witnessed something leave somebody else. My experience was the day after Ibogaine, in what you would call the gray day. I would inhale white, clean air. Just this is just with every breath. I would inhale white, clean air, and I would exhale a black, smoky hand. And like a black, smoky hand would come out to like, to like the wrist area, and it would dissipate. And then I would inhale. So coming out of the mouth and coming out of the chest, because I've heard all the stories. I've met hundreds of people who have done Ibogaine, and the one I actually sat in on, I was probably 3 weeks after doing Ibogaine, and I was trying to help. I was so grateful, and I was in a tremendous mood every day. Like nothing could shake me. I was like, just put me in charge. Just I'll sit with everybody for 16, 18 hours. I don't care. I just want to watch them because I know the magic that can happen. I'll grab a book in the corner, and then you just trip over there on the bed. Just go ahead. I'll just hang out. And in one instance, about 3.5 hours in, this was a woman named Joanna. I was going to say Jessica. Her name was Joanna. That's her real name. And she would love to tell this story. So she, about 3.5 hours in, she was laying horizontal on the bed. She grabbed both sides of the bed, and her chest shot up, just like The Exorcist. Her chest shot up, and it was like a black Lego piece, like a black smoky Lego piece left her heart, and a red one came back in and filled it in. And she sat up and she said, it's gone. And I was in shock, and I said, what? She goes, my addiction's gone. It happens like that under Ibogaine. Like, the moment when it's over.
Wow.
You breathe a sigh of relief, and you go, it's like you were mind controlled and someone snapped you out of it. That's exactly what it is. So
That's
I can confirm it's absolutely a spiritual affliction. There's no question about it. What is happening in the spirit world plays out into the human experience, and that spiritual schism, that fissure in your spirit and through your soul, really, it's corrupting you.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
and it plays out as drug addiction, or it plays out as alcoholism,
Right.
or it
Filling
plays
the
out
fire.
as or
Yes.
as McDonald's addiction. You know what I mean? It plays
Yep.
out in one of those ways. But the problem is in your soul, and that's what's released. So the story about the guy with the serpent. So this is another Ibogaine thing that you pick up, is each drug has a different demon associated with it. The opiate demon is typically smoky and black. And for me, it was a beautiful woman in a black dress who was trying to convince me, Austin, you don't want to leave me. I thought you loved me. Austin, we can be together forever. That's
Ooh,
that's the opiate demon. It lures you in romantically. That's why the book is written poetically and romantically, because that was the experience. It was a poetic experience, even during the time. Um, and then the crystal meth demon is likened to a bear covered in green shards of glass. It's like more like a bear energy that sits on your chest and just sits still and will not move. Whereas the wispy opiate demon is more of like, for a woman, it would be the most handsome man in the world on the beach in Greece. It would be the ultimate alluring of the other sex, or whatever, however you want to say it. So yes, so the serpent coming out of him. And I also had another experience during a Reiki session where it wasn't a serpent wrapped around my spine, but he said there was a skeleton holding my spine that wouldn't let me go.
Wow.
And I could feel the weight on my back. I could feel it, and I could feel the cold bones, because it's taking place in your kundalini. It's taking place up your spine and into the back of your head, where it all connects, and where you guys know where everything's going on.
Yeah.
And you're sick. And so to stop doing drugs, you're just putting a band-aid on a shark bite, as they say in those rooms. Like, drug addiction's not your problem. You have a much greater problem than that. And it's that you need to identify why you hate yourself. To say it so simply, to say it as simple as possible. There's a reason you like hurting yourself. You respond positively to your own abuse. Why?
Yeah.
And that's what you have to ask yourself.
And I think there's many layers. I think there's many, not layers, levels to that, because even though not everybody is a drug addict or an alcoholic or a sex addict or any kind of addict,
Right.
I think the self-harm, and I'm not talking about, I mean, also the people, nowadays with cutting and so forth, that as well, but even something that seems very benign, right? Just the woman who was 60 years old that wasn't addicted, but
Right.
woke up to her life, right? And so I sit with people, Gina sits with all day long, who are just like, what the fuck? I'm 50 years old. What the fuck am I doing? Why am I with this guy? Why did I do this? Why did I choose that? And so,
and recently, I mean, you and I have talked about this, Colleen. I'm getting clients that are just in the middle of they're like, I need to change my life. Like out of nowhere, just they've got to make changes. They're like, I'm stuck. And they wanna make a transformation. So, we're kind of, sometimes we have inner clients that we share, but just I just keep noticing that I don't know what's in the air, what the energy is, but people are looking to change and they're starting to realize I've only got so much time on this earth and I need to start making my life happier, shedding all the bullshit from their life. And there's this huge epiphany coming through people. And so we're kind of working on, making changes. And the interesting thing that I got that you had said a little bit ago about, inhaling the white light and exhaling, it's weird because sometimes when I'm working with people and I have them breathe in, I'm always saying, breathe in.
oh, you froze.
But there's certain people I say, exhale any negativity. Am I frozen now?
You're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Am I frozen? Oh my God. Okay. There's some people when I'm saying exhale, I'm like negativity. And I start seeing black smoke coming up. And I say to them, I'm like, whatever this means to you or negativity. And I give them that prompt of, it could be like black smoke. I said, that's kind of what I'm envisioning right now. So it's interesting with some people, I see this black smoke coming up from, as a release.
Yeah.
So
all the lies we tell.
Yeah. The lies we carry.
Yep. The lies we carry.
There's so much to it. So my God, there's so much I have to talk about with this whole spiritual thing, but I have to backtrack. Okay. We're going to talk about, you went to Florida. You went to a traditional rehab place. How many times did you go? Was it twice?
To rehab?
Yeah, to Florida, traditional rehab.
Oh, I've been to traditional rehab 14 times.
Okay, 14 times.
Yep.
And in the book, you came out worse. You would leave worse than when you entered.
Yeah, every single time.
I want to talk about that. What's happening? What's happening in our rehab centers that they're taking all this money and people are coming back? Now, I'm not an expert. I know people go to rehab and they do have positive experiences, but there's a lot of people that are not having positive experiences. So what's happening there?
Let's first talk about the spiritual aspect of it and the power of words. That's why words, you spell words. So when you say words, you're casting a spell. That's the etymology of the word.
Words are powerful.
Words are powerful. Words shape your reality. And so the very first step, the very first thing you do is, hi, I'm Gina, I'm an alcoholic.
I know.
So you affirm, affirm right off the bat.
Over
and over.
You define who you are.
You define who you are.
Because this healer that we had met and we were talking and I forgot what happened, but I'm like, yeah, let's do a session. And I sat with her because she was like a healer who had no training. She was born into it, knew her stuff, old school. And when she talked about anxiety, she says, she said, it's so when she says, when you're working with somebody, she says, if they're saying that they have anxiety or they are anxious, she says that you're creating a permanent state. She says the better way to word it is that you're having an anxiety experience. She goes, because an experience comes and goes. She says, but when you say I have anxiety or I am anxious, she goes, you're creating a permanence to your identity and your feelings. And so that's very, very, very interesting that's how they start you out, that you set this intention and these words that's what you are. You're an addict.
Yeah, the first thing you do is hand over any sovereignty that you have when you walked in. It's the first thing you do before you speak. You have to admit that your spirit is in chaos and that you have no control over it and that you don't see it. It's just all these things, and that's just the first minute that you're in there. That's just the first minute.
Wow.
And it's an incredibly dangerous and negative environment. I've done the rehabs, I've done the halfway houses. Each time I meet more serious criminals because that's who I'm becoming also, so I'm mirroring all these other energies around me, and I'm becoming a more serious drug addict and criminal. So everyone around me is becoming one. We're feeding off each other, and it got more out of control every single time. The first rehab I ever went to was called Tully Hill. And I was 14. I was 14 because they had to break the rules because the minimum age was 16. Wow. So they had to break the rules to let me into Tully Hill. And I did well. It was a 30-day thing. And again, I wasn't thinking existentially when I was a young boy. It never even crossed my mind. All the time my ego was developing. I was addicted to drugs. So all those things were all intertwined. And then I think I ended up in rehab just a couple months later. And I was still 14, 15. But the Florida one specifically, the Florida one is interesting. That's why I wrote about so much of it in the book, because the infamous OxyContin Express that everyone seems to have forgotten about, right? Like, it just blows my mind that people aren't more on the ball about that. But I've had to explain that to everybody, the OxyContin Express and what was happening in 2011. Like, people just didn't understand how out of control it was. Doctors were going away for life for manslaughter because they were just over prescribing, and they just buried it. They buried the story. It was an interstate giant, racketeering ring, basically, full of doctors who were getting outrageous kickbacks for prescribing dangerous drugs. So in 2011, when I went to that rehab, I went to a rehab called Ambrosia in Port St. Lucie, Florida. That's where it took place. And so that was the story I wrote about in the book, where I was coming off Suboxone for 30 days. And should I explain what Suboxone is? Do you guys know what Suboxone is? Should I explain it to everybody? Okay. So Suboxone was, or is, it was kind of pushed as this miracle drug. Do you know what's the old heroin one? Methadone.
Okay.
No, methadone
is. I remember, not methadone. Yep.
Okay, so methadone is a doctor prescribed way for people to get off heroin. That's what it is. But it gets you high. You can abuse methadone easily. I've done it a million times. So Suboxone is the newer methadone. It was to combat this new opiate crisis. So and so Suboxone has unique properties, and it's designed to be, it's just evil. Like, the devil wears a lab coat. Let me clear that up right now. I would rather come off heroin twice than Suboxone once. So you would abuse it, and the withdrawals were so intense and long lasting. It could be 3 or 4 months before you feel better. Whereas heroin,
it's the one where you are describing the pain in your body was so bad.
Yes, it was so intense.
You felt like you were dying.
It was 100% anxiety. I've said before that the withdrawal from Suboxone, it's the most human you can feel. It's 100% anxiety, 100% depression, 100% calm, 100% chaos, 100% physical pain, 100% emotional pain. it's so overwhelming that you wish you would die. It's simple as that. And
are you in a controlled place when this is happening, or are you just walking around? I mean,
the time in, do you mean in the rehab? Inside the rehab? Inside the rehab, it was a big house. It was a compound of like 4 or 5 really nice houses, like 3 guys' houses and 2 girls' houses, and there was like 5 or 6 bedrooms in each big house. So I was on the couch crying my eyes out, dying. I was a young man. In the Florida one, I was 19. So I was a young man, you know, cannot get better. Weeks have gone by. People, they keep drug testing me because they think I'm still getting high because I'm just not getting better. Wow. And I was like, no, you guys don't get it. Suboxone was unheard of at this time in 2011. It was brand new. And I was one of the guinea pigs for the long-term Suboxone, the taper, which could be as much as 5 years. They have some people on now, which is unreal. I know. So I was one of the first long-term Suboxone people. So I brought that down to Florida, and none of them had ever heard of it. They said, we don't know what to do with you. I said, I have to taper off it, or I'm gonna, like, something bad's gonna happen. Like, I'm gonna end up in the fucking hospital. I need to taper off of it. And they were like, no, you can't. You just got to fight it. Like, we've seen this before. I'm like, no, please listen. You don't understand. And so that went on. And I think on day 62, the whole rehab, all the guys and girls, had a standing ovation for me because I stood up and I said, I feel better today.
Oh my gosh.
And everyone clapped for me. Because the day after that, when I started to truly feel better after 2 months, I was standing up straight. I had gained like 6 inches because I was standing up straight. Wow. People were like, you're a different person, a completely different person. That's how serious it was.
Was it wearing off? I mean, is that what was happening? Like, you had.
Yes. Okay. So when I said the devil wears a lab coat, like, whoever invented Suboxone, that man or woman, they need to be shot immediately. It's the most diabolical. Like, you can't get rid of it. No amount of healthy food or diet or enemas or hyperbaric oxygen chamber. It stores in your bones, and it stores in your cerebral spinal fluid. It's designed by the devil himself, like, without question. So your cerebral spinal fluid gets recycled. It gets recycled up through your spine and to the base of your neck and all that, and down to the coccyx and back up. And so it's always poisoned. And so it lasts forever. It lasts years.
Unbelievable. I just know when I was reading that part, I mean, I was literally tense just reading your description of what you were going through, I mean, it's painful to read it, painful emotionally, and even feeling it physically, like, kind of just through your descriptions. I was like, oh my gosh, it's unfathomable.
It was immense pain. Wow. But the body and the mind, they have this way of forgetting about how intense the pain was, and then you end up making the same mistakes again and again. But after the 62 days, everyone clapped. And then I went to a series of halfway houses. And then I think 2 months after that, I went to jail for a year. So it didn't take long. I had never used a needle before I went to Florida. I had never used a needle.
That was what blew my mind. That you started using the needle after rehab. I was like, oh my God, how does this happen?
I had met people who couldn't believe that I hadn't done it. And they were like, dude, you're wasting drugs. You're a fucking idiot. You got to try it like this, you dumbass. And I was like, all right. And I was down.
So I guess my question is, though, you're in rehab. So where do you get a chance to do that? Are you following me, Kolein?
Yeah.
Like, my brain is saying that you're got to be in some kind of controlled setting where this can't happen.
There were rehab techs that would go from house to house every half hour, every 45 minutes, every hour, something like that. But for the most time, it was 5 drug addicts, usually active drug addicts, let's be honest. 5 drug addicts in a big mansion in Florida, and we got nothing but war stories and time. you know? So what do? We dream up ways to get high more efficiently, or to pool our money, or, you know, things like that, obviously. Because once I
How do you
left
get the
there,
drugs though? Like how do the drugs filter into a rehab
a lot of
facility?
the people who are from the area are the threat, because
Okay.
they, you know,
They
it
have,
might even get as crazy. Sorry, Colleen.
oh yeah, just that they're connected to the
Yeah,
outside.
they're connected. It's one
Yeah.
phone call, and then you have some guy throw it over the fence in a balloon, and then, you know, and then it's like, okay, because I've even seen people go as far as to plant people in rehabs to make money, to sell drugs, like to plant them in there, and they
Oh, wow.
pitch it over the
Like as a
fence
worker and
as an
then
employee. Yeah,
wow.
exactly, as a dealer or
Wow.
as a mule.
Ooh.
So I have a practical, and I'm just looking at the time. We're coming on an hour now, but I have a sort of a two practical kind of questions. I don't know if you can answer them quickly, take as much time as you need, but who pays for this?
Who pays for rehabs?
For rehab?
Insurance companies pay.
Insurance companies pay. So
Yep.
you went in 14 times.
Yes. Yep. All before I was 26. And because I was on my dad's insurance up until I was 26, it was paid for every single time.
So between the ages of 14 and 26, you were in rehab 14 times
Yes.
with no results.
No results. Only after Ibogaine. And then even after
Wow.
Ibogaine, I had to fall on my face again. And then for another 5 years, or for another couple years, I had to fall on my face still more. So
It took 3 times.
three,
Yeah.
Yes, it's like
three.
third time was the charm. And that's what I want to talk about in the next segment. Like what clicked that third time.
Yeah, it
Because
would be good to go ahead. Sorry.
oh no, I was just gonna say I think it's important for people to know that, you know, when you are healing, sometimes, you know, it's like coming to me. You're not going to come to me once and then everything is going to magically disappear. It's a work in progress. And, you know, you have to have the willingness to want to do the changing. And the one thing that I did love that you said in your book, you took complete responsibility when you fell on your face the first time after the Ibogaine, because you
Yeah.
said, the drug didn't fail me, I failed the drug.
Yes.
And you took responsibility for making bad choices.
Yes. I went back. I can remember. I remember what I was wearing that night, because it was such a tremendous, colossal mistake. You know, it was either the first night I got back from Mexico or the second, and I saw the dealer. He saw me. He didn't know where I was, obviously, you know, for the past week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And I got high again. I was 21, wasn't thinking straight, did it again. It's as simple as that. Full responsibility. I wish there was someone to blame. That would make it more fun and easy. There's no one to blame, you know?
Nope.
Yeah, well,
But that's growth right there. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, you fell on your face, but it's growth, right? Because
Yeah.
it's kind of narcissistic to try to blame somebody for
Oh my God.
you're making, right?
Yeah.
So you didn't do
I wish. I wish.
yeah.
it almost
Yeah, it does.
it
Always easier.
almost also as though you know, sort of testing that, right? You're clean, you're clear, you feel amazing, and then you were like almost a test, whether you were conscious of it or not. But because of the Ibogaine and the spiritual awakening, you couldn't blame anybody else.
Yes. Yeah.
You had to own that.
Yeah. It's almost like the Ibogaine gods hold a mirror right in your face, and they force you to look. They say, you are the problem, dude. It's you.
Mhm.
When your life sucks, it's your fault. Here's the mirror, you know?
Wow.
Yeah. It's a very fatherly, stern, rigid energy.
Well,
Can't lie to it.
you can't lie to it.
No.
Yeah.
No,
So, God, this is so good. We might have to do more.
this is so interesting.
So we're going to end right now. Thank you so much. And when we come back, we'll figure out the next time and so forth that we're going to get together for part 2. We might even do a third part as well. I want to talk about not only the experience of Ibogaine, but I want to talk about also, are you experiencing any long-term physical or spiritual effects from the prior years before Ibogaine? So maybe we can talk about that the next time we meet.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like we're just getting started. It's been
I
an
know,
hour.
so-
You know, we could probably
We
go
are
on for
just
3.
getting started. We
Yeah.
are just getting started. There's a lot to talk about here. So
Yeah, we can do one next week or whenever.
Okay.
Or whenever,
Yeah.
you know, Gina, you just let me know.
Yeah, we're going to we can get together as a group and discuss it. You know, when we're can do this. So
That's
all right.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone who's watching. And we will head off and enjoy the rest of your evening, Austin.
Yes, Austin,
Yes.
thank you. We cannot wait to continue this conversation.
Of course, you're welcome. I look forward to it.